Hey everyone, this lecture video is about a little bit more in-depth into functions. Last video, well one of the last videos you probably watched, was how functions basically work. We've got your basic functions that we can pass things to, they can print things, they can return things. So this time we're going to take that and we're going to do a little interactive little project. Now, I've created a function, and I'm going to open it up so you can see it. And what we want to do is find the biggest of two numbers. So, outside of the main, I'm going to say, int max is what I'm going to call it. And I'm going to give it two numbers, int in1, in2. These, again, could be called anything. I just call them in1, in2 for convenience. Now, to find the largest of two numbers, I give those two numbers here, and then I have to compare. Which of these two is bigger? So I have an if statement. Now, I could just say greater than. If n1 is greater than, I return n1. If n2 is greater than, then I return n2. Now, the difference between this and this is what happens if they're both the same? Well, it returns the second one here, right? If I do it this way, it returns the first one. Now, this one, depending on what we're trying to do with the project itself, it may be important to do the same, but for us, we just want to know which is the biggest one, and if they're both the same, then we'll just return one number. This can only return us one number. So this is one of those cases where we make a function that's going to be used maybe tens of thousands, millions of times. We want to know which of these numbers is bigger. It's a game where, well, equip the highest damage weapon or something. Which of these numbers is bigger? It could be any number of things. Card game, poker, blackjack, whatever, which of these is bigger, the person wins. That sort of thing. But you'll do it constantly. So in this case, I've got a function that does just that. So it's going to return the biggest one. Now we're going to go down to the little main area. I'm just printing it out. I could make a variable for it if I wanted to, int var1 equals max, and then just print out that, but it's going to end up being the same either way. So I'm going to run this, and we're going to take a little look. It should tell me 100 is the biggest, obviously. I would say that's the case. And if I make some changes and whatnot to the numbers, it should, just give me the correct number. If it was 120, now it should tell me 120 is the biggest. There it is. All right, now comes the interactive part. I've got two other functions here written out. And I want you to write those, as we see here. They have a brace and a brace. And I want you to fill in the middle section for at least this first one here. I got two because I'm going to show you two ways to do this. But what I want you to do is find the biggest between three numbers now. And we'll see how that looks code-wise. Now, there's a number of ways to do it. Of course, you could use there's actually built-in functions in every language that can do basically what I'm asking you to do. But we're going to code it so we learn how the code works. So I don't want you to actually do that yet. But what I want you to do is, using what we've done so far, make this work for three. Now, the hint I can give you is you're going to need compound ifs, ands, and it's going to be a little bit longer, a little bit wider. You can follow this exact same blueprint for the most part after that. But there's got to be two kind of conditions on each if statement here. Now there is a way to do all this in one line, and I'll show you how that works too. If you can figure that out, that's great. So pause right here and try to put it together. And then see if it's pretty similar to what I've got. So again, pause, I'll wait, and go ahead. All right, at this point, I assume you paused, wrote all kinds of great code, and now you're ready to see what it looks like. So let's take a look at our first example here. A little bigger. Now, notice that I've got compound if statements here. This and that, and then else. Since I have three items I'm comparing, this compares if the first one is bigger than the second, and the first one's bigger than the third. Then we return the first. Now, if I don't have the less than or equal to, if I take out the equal to for this, there are some conditions where, you know, if I have two of the same and they're kind of like on the opposite or whatever, it'll just return the third one, because that's what the else is. So we're doing this so it doesn't return just the third one, even if it's not the biggest. So there's a couple of conditions there where it will actually return the wrong thing if you do it without the little equal sign like this. Now, if n1's the biggest, return n1. Else if n2 is the biggest. And if it's not 1 or 2, it's got to be 3. That's what that looks like. Now, you see, it got a little lengthier than the previous code, right? But I can still find out which is the biggest. We can come down here and do basically this whole thing all over again. Actually, I'll just max A. And we'll pass in another number, 80 or something. And we should see that it's going to give me the 120. 120. There we go. Now, if I wanted 4 numbers, well, you know, I'd put in an extra int in 4. Wish it would stop jumping around like that. And then, of course, this would be n1 greater than or equal to n2, and n1 greater than or equal to n3, and n1 greater than or equal to n4. And then I would do that for each one of these. I'd have an extra if here going this way. I'd have an extra if going across. So the more I add, the lengthier this is going to be. Now, in order to do this with one line of code without using any built-in functions, we simply need to do this. Now, it may look a little odd, but I've already got a function up here that finds me the biggest between 2, right? So what we're doing here is, if you remember how algebra works, right? If I make a, you know, I don't know, 4 plus 6 times 3 with some parentheses inside, maybe. Let's do it this way. Pop. We'll do it this way. That way it makes more sense. Okay. So if I do parentheses like this, it's always going to do the innermost parentheses first. It's going to do 5 plus 3, 8, times 4, 32. It does the innermost first. So this will do the innermost first. What's the max of 120 and 80? Well, it's going to come up here, plug it in, 120, 80, which is the biggest, 120. This will become 120. This whole line just basically changes to 120. And then we come back up and we find the max of 100 and 120. Well, what's 100 and 120? Well, we come up here, we plug it in, and it's clearly 120. And if I needed to add an n4, well, I just do the same thing that I just did, max n3, comma, n4, and voila, this works for an extra one. And I just needed to add a little bit more code to it. So this is how you could do it in one single line. Now, neither of these is wrong. And of course, to do this, you have to have that base one built first. But it just shows you that there's multiple ways to code kind of the same thing. Those who move on to programming 2 classes and stuff like that, this will be very useful and frightening at the same time, because there's never going to be one right answer to do something usually. There will almost always be multiple ways to get to the same result, which makes cheating a little bit more difficult, which is good for me. Also, technically, I'd say it's good for the students too. But it also gives you more paths to that victory as well. You're not stuck just learning how to do it one specific way. So this is your rough outline of just, how to use some more advanced functions and things. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to let me know.